Yo. The kids official sliding on the instrumental. Nordic combos, twist your mental like forbidden.
Peace to the public and power to the people.
You're going to have to forgive us. We've been listening to DJ Drama this week. That's the wrong person to listen to before you do an intro. I'm feeling wild spicy. But I'm happy to be here in the building and in the space where the vulnerable are powerful. And where the most gangster thing you could do is serve. Welcome to All the Way Live.
My name is Zulake Gila. I'm joined by my brother, Miles Francis, and our producer, Hassan. And together, we culminate to give you the live, All the Way Live show. And what this show is really all about is a space where some brothers who are community activists, who are servants of the people, gather together to combine art and information. So we dedicate ourselves to being able to invest in information that we then give to y'all, and we do it for one reason, Mr. Miles Xavier. There's only one reason that we do. Well, there's a few reasons, but this one more than any.
Uno.
Which is to be a place of positivity, man. We really want to be able to create a space where you can come through in the day, get some positive energy, get some cool information you can use to sound smart around your friends with, around your peoples, but just be rejuvenated, because we do know that depression is at an all-time high, suicide is at an all-time high, loneliness is at an all-time high, and so, you know, for us, man, as people that have had to go through a world where those things directly impact the people we're living with, we're motivated to bring that show to anybody, man. And whether it's one person, 10 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people, it don't matter to us. Everybody is welcome to this show of carefully curated content for your cranium.
Big facts. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you for saying it. Thank you for welcoming us into this space, into this conversation. And shout out to y'all out there. Y'all know what's going on, man. South Africa is in the building. The UK is in the building. Shout out to our producer Hassan, you know what I'm saying? And you know what's going on this side. Chicago is in the building. This podcast is recorded on stolen land. It will be recorded on stolen land next week, and then in the week after that, y'all really gonna have something on y'all hands, man. My boy's way is gonna be on this side, so look forward to that. Look forward to all the illustrious changes that brings. But we always center ourselves and ground ourselves in this space, knowing that this land was cared for by the Potawatomi people, the Council of the Three Fires, and the violence done to remove them from this land, to remove those First Nations people from Chicago, is inseparable from the violence that we see in this city today, in this country today, and in this world today. So for that reason, we lift up love for indigenous folks the world over. We lift up love between black and brown people the world over. Even more so this week, you already know, it's Hispanic Heritage Month. We're going to get into that. But for that reason, we know that the intro is over. Let's get into the show.
Yeah, I get that. But is we live, though? Is we, like, all the way live, though? You heard?
Where impact meets art, that's what we do. And so part of that for us, man, is being able to lift up and celebrate different heritages. My brother Miles always says in his intro, we lift up love for black and brown people the world over. We lift up love for indigenous people the world over. And I think that those two elements definitely are encompassed in what is a Hispanic Heritage Month to be celebrated, you know? What people don't know is that me and you have both spent time in countries that speak Spain. Quite honestly, me and you speak Spanish.
Un poquito. Un poco.
You spent some time overseas. You spent some time in Colombia, man.
Yeah, what a time. Colombia was an amazing time. I got to spend some time in Bogota, in Medellin, man. And yeah, I encourage anybody who has the opportunity to get out and travel, South America especially, so much rich culture, and Latin America in general, man, great food, incredible, like, just geography, like beaches, anything you want, mountains, hiking. It was amazing. So Colombia was super dope. Tell us a little bit about your experiences, my man.
You know, like, I grew up in Venezuela, right? I spent a couple of years in Venezuela, if I have to say it correctly, at Escuela Campo Alegre, where I did my 11th grade and my 12th grade. So I graduated from a Spanish speaking Latino culture, you know what I mean? But I think like the ties run deep into that. Visiting Barcelona, visiting Madrid, you know, being in love with with Paella, you know what I mean? One of my dreams actually is to go running with the Bulls. I don't know if you join me on that. Maybe you could take an all the way live trip to run with the Bulls.
And that's why it's important that we have this show, man, for perspective. And like, we unite the diaspora, but we also let y'all know that we are not a monolith. So while there are some of us, you know, some of our black brothers and brown folks that would love to do some stuff like running with the Bulls, I, as an African American man, I ain't with that. That's not for us. But I appreciate you and your adventurous spirit.
I don't think that's an African American thing whatsoever, man. I think that's just a fun adventure seeking thing. And is it are we at that point now we acknowledge that I am more of a risk taker between the two of us? Is that is that fair?
In some ways, yeah. Cause you know, even when we was in South Africa, right? What's the canyon with the longest bungee jump in the world?
I don't remember, but there was a canyon with the longest bungee jump in the world. I remember that.
You know what I'm saying? And I was for sure not down. You might have been eyeing it a little bit. That's, I don't know. Maybe it's a black folks in the States thing, but we don't bungee jump. We don't skydive. You know what I'm saying? So we're not running with no bulls, except the Chicago Bulls. I love the intro. You know what I'm saying? You hit me with the United Center music, that we might have something going on. But other than that, nah, I'm cooling.
Yo, could you kindly explain the difference between Hispanic and Latino?
Oh, dang, you're going to put a brother on the spot. But I actually think it does have something to do with the actually descendants from Spain versus folks that are descendants from Latin America, right? And so Latin America includes like Mexico and everything that's kind of in Central America, and some parts of South America too, right? Cuba, some of the islands. So I think that's what we mean when we mean like Latinx. And I think Hispanic is, if I'm not mistaken, descendant from folks from Spain. I might have that switched up, but that's my best shot at it.
Yeah, and speaking of running with the Chicago Bulls, man, a big part of Chicago, Chicago does hold a pretty wide Hispanic community, and a lot of those people you know, we're friends with, of course, but also is just highlighting the different people in the community that make up the society that is Chicago, a city that we do love a lot, which is why we found it quite important to be able to lift this up. So celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month from the 15th of September to the 15th of October. I know me and Miles are going to be celebrating, making a whole bunch of burritos. We're going to be making a whole bunch of...
No lechuga.
No lechuga. Por favor, no lechuga. I think one of my favorite pastimes is just eating Spanish food. And Mexican food in specific. Mexican food actually is what we love.
No doubt. And so, yeah, man, it's incredible to have an opportunity to lift this up. I know that every February we have conversations around Black History Month, and the fact that all of these cultures for sure need to be celebrated and acknowledged throughout the year. But it's also dope to be able to, indulge in some Hispanic cuisine, but also in like the deeper aspects of the culture, right? So here in Chicago, the Chicago Latino Theater Alliance, the annual festival Destinos, is coming back for Hispanic Heritage Month. It's a 5-week festival, and they're doing stage productions and venues across the whole city. The National Museum of Mexican Art in Pilsen is bringing back its Day of the Dead exhibit, beginning September 23rd. So yeah, man, there's a lot of fire stuff going on, ways to get engaged with the history, and ways to lift up Black and brown folks as we do on this show, and also acknowledging like Afro-Latino heritage. It's a great opportunity to get informed in a festive way.
Speaking of helping people, one of the things that we both dedicate our lives to doing is helping folks. I actually haven't been able to speak to you this week because you've been so active in your community. What's this week been like, and what has been going on in the community?
Man, it seems like we had a little bit of a break. Kind of summer activities started to chill for a little bit. There was maybe 2 weeks somewhere in August of like peace, and now we back ramping up for back to school. So last week, Bright Star Community Outreach, an organization that we rock with heavy in my job through the Center for Youth Violence Prevention, they were able to put on a family festival in Bronzeville where like over 2,500 people were able to come, get backpacks, get toys for their kids, get all sorts of supplies. It was super 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 dope. Shout out to Pastor Harris and Bright Star for being able to put that on. It was just incredible to see their generosity and to see folks get like the resources that they need, right? Like it was like they were giving away appliances, lawnmowers, they were giving away pots and pans. Like it was really super dope. And they do a lot of amazing work in the community. So shout out to Bright Stars Family Festival. We've been planning for open boulevards. I got to jog over to that as soon as we're done with the show. We blocking off it's basically a block party called Open Boulevards, also in Bronzeville on the south side of the city. And we're planning for the Be the Healing conference next week with Dr. Joy DeGrew, who is an educator, an author, an abolitionist. And our theme for this year is reparations and repair and healing. So come out to learn about that in the context of the African diaspora, in the context of people of color in the United States, and indigenous folks. And so it's like 2 days of a conference and then a third day of just like tours of the city with that, all of those themes in mind. So super fire, Be the Healing, Dr. Joy DeGrew, 23rd through the 25th. And then my brother touches down and we all preparing for that. You know what I'm saying? It's looking like Coming to America over here for real, as impact expert. Swagila prepares to pull up this side. So yeah, man, that's what we've been on. What about you?
Preparing for this trip to Chicago. You know, we've got so much work, there's so much opportunities that are in front of us, and I think one thing that we always want to be able to get out is to let people know that, you know, this is a fully collaborative effort. Is that if there's work that we're doing that, you know, excites anybody or wants to be able to make partnerships or just figure out different ways to keep helping these kids, that's what we're there for. And we're very excited about the changes that we're going to see put into place. It's going to be quite an exciting time for us. And more than anything, we're more excited to give you all this carefully curated content. Miles, what else we got for the folks this week?
So much. Let's keep it pushing. We broke. If I broke, we ain't got it. Broke. If I broke. Yo. Man, we start this show every week acknowledging that it's hard out here. It's hard out here. Yo. And part of the reason why it's hard out here is because of the economic state of things. This conversation right here kicked off with a discussion of trickle-down economics. Our illustrious producer, Hassan, brought it to us as the myth of trickle-down economics. And we got some pushback from my entrepreneurially inclined brother and confidant. So let's get into it.
You see, I think what you do so well, Miles, is be able to package things in a very beautiful manner. Because what actually happened was a full fight. It's a full fight. Our producer actually was acting like Don King promoting the fight. I believe he told us to get our gats ready for this conversation. You know, so a lot of the times in figuring out what the best thing to talk about is how we talk about it. And they would be like, all right, cool. This is some dope shit to get into. So that was one of those fights. And I said vehemently that I don't want to be put in a place where I'm defending capitalism like the evil one. And that seems to be the corner you've immediately painted me into.
I'm not trying to paint you in that corner. And I don't even think that like evil is the word that I wanna throw around in terms of capitalism, because I think even where I'm at currently, there's a foundation for, and we'll get into the terms, but like social democracy that still maintains a lot of capitalistic elements that I think it's possible to work around. It's possible to find a middle ground. But I think so. Let's acknowledge that that is in the air, right? A lot of people are saying capitalism is evil. That's something. Eat the rich. We had that conversation in regard to Jay-Z last week. That is something that people are throwing out there. I'm not coming to you, my brother, my dog, with that energy. I'm just saying. I think we both see that energy out there. I agree with the critique of capitalism without going so far as to say everybody who believes in it is evil, but I think that pressure is real. So let's explore your belief. Maybe we can start with trickle down economics and then expand in terms of like how I don't want you to have to defend it, but explain how you feel comfortable being a capitalist in light of all of the ways that we've seen it affect people and in light of the criticisms that are upon it now.
For one, I don't walk around thinking I'm a capitalist. That's for one, right? I'm not moving around being like, I'm gonna make a capitalist decision today and like join the capitalist group on WhatsApp where we share propaganda. That's not the case, right? So part of the reason why we all seem to be on there's a lot of room for extreme ends where it's like eat the rich on one side, but then on the other side you have the rich who are then being the ones that are supporting a lot of these foundations more than anybody else. So it's a bit of that it seems like we're on opposite ends of the spectrum, but in actuality there's a lot that we can each borrow from because the system of capitalism is made up. I believe in fairness, in the ability for anyone to have access to resources in order to be able to create, to work, to exist. The pursuit of freedom, as they put it as they put it in the Constitution. Everyone has the right to the pursuit of freedom. So a capitalist society is one where ideally in its ideal state it can create that, but in its perverse state, which I believe we are very much in right now, it's highly unfair.
Got you. So just slow walking this thing. You believe in capitalism as an economic system that it's the optimal economic system, and feel that it promotes equality or efficiency, or what's that word there that you would put at the end of that?
Opportunity. Operating at its ideal state, it can create opportunity, right? And I think the question we were the term that kicked off this conversation was trickle down economics, which would then be the idea that as money moves from money has a trickle down effect. So think of a stack of champagne glasses like we have here for our YouTube audience, and as you keep filling up the top of the champagne glass, which would insinuate the 1%, and that's the people at the very top end of the echelon who are receiving the most, and then that will spill down towards all the other glasses towards them. That's trickle down economics. Do you interpret that term in the same way? Are we speaking on the same language?
We are, yeah. And so you believe that this is an effective way of serving everyone's best interests, including the citizens at the bottom.
No, that's not what I said. What I said was that trickle down economics does happen. It doesn't happen at the rate that we might want it to, but it does happen because and that's just like that's taking a very matter of fact approach about it, right? That's not taking a fully conscious approach about it. Just saying like technically it actually does happen, because even if money is moved in a transaction, that is transaction fees. Those transaction fees pay salaries. Those salaries get passed down to families. Those families then, there's always a trickle down effect that occurs. But is it a fair trickle down effect we're seeing now? I would be hard pressed to argue that. Argue that it isn't. I think it is unfair, to clarify.
Cool. I'm glad we can agree on that, right? Trickle down economics is unfair. There's a baseline to start with. I'm glad you said matter of fact. We in the you describe it as a fight. It was a kerfuffle, right? Before the podcast, we decided we was gonna bring some facts to this. So one of the sources that I found in terms of facts is the 2022 World Inequality Report, right? The aim of the Inequality Report is to present the latest and most complete data available on inequality to inform democratic debate. That's what this is. That's the word for it, right? Debate, right? And it brings data together from the World Wealth and Income Database from countries around the world, right? I'm going to hit y'all with some facts real quick, and then I want my brother to react, right? Global inequity increased between 1820 and 1910. Basically, this was in the context of Western colonial empires. And then it stabilized for a long time between 1910 and 1920. And the reason at a very high level, right? So global inequality increases and then stays very high. The only reason it doesn't keep increasing is because while within countries, the richer are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, right? Like the richest people in poorer countries are getting closer to the rich and wealthier countries. That gap is getting smaller. While for most countries across the world, the gap between the rich and poor is getting wider. So rich and poor gap getting wider, rich and rich gap getting smaller, that equals out to stabilization of a high level of inequality, right? There's income inequality, which is how much people earn, and then there's wealth inequality. The poorest half of the global population owns 2% of the global wealth, right? Like
That's a wild fact.
Yeah. The poorest half of the global population owns 2% of the total wealth in terms of ownership, right? The richest 10% of the population owns 76% of the wealth, right? The top 1% of global earners took 38% of all the additional wealth accumulated since the 1990s. Of all the wealth that existed in 1990 until 2020, the top 1% took 38% of all the additional wealth generated, right? The wealth of the richest individuals on earth has grown 6 to 9% per year since 1955, whereas the average wealth has grown 3.2%.
You see, what my brother just did is he said, we'll make Zwe react to facts, and then proceeded to read out 20 individual facts.
But I'm just saying, I would say that supports that. Go ahead.
You see, I don't disagree. And matter of fact, a statistic that's part of those numbers is that over the last 2 years, there have been the most amount of people who have migrated into poverty, as well as at the same time as the most amount of billionaires being created, which further indicates how unfair the system is at the moment. And not to speak of the system as this lofty, mythical being, but speaking of the system of where people are allowed to engage in the economy and what they receive for their efforts, and then on the other end, what is actually being paid, and how people make those wealths. And I think when we look at how wealth is made in today's context, a lot of it does come from a very unethical mismanagement of people and their resources. So when we take some of the top richest companies right now, like Meta, and you realize that Meta, through acts like Cambridge Analytica, was at a point where they were selling our data towards these campaign marketing companies, who then able to twist it and then manipulate an election, which is what happened. So that obviously comes at the detriment of our safety, our safety as users on this massive platform. And they made billions of dollars on it. Apple with Cobalt, all of us who have phones are participating in part of a system in where a lot of wealth is being taken from countries like Chile, countries like even in a lot of African countries, where they produce this mineral that is in all of our phones. So you know, that I think when we look at the top 1% and how they've made their capital, that's where we go, okay, that is unethical. But the system itself is something that we've created. So this idea of capitalism is something that we've created. And I believe that we can always shift it into being something that can help us more so than it can hurt us.
What do you mean? Who do you mean when you say we've created capitalism?
It's by we, and this is where we're getting real meta, okay? So brace yourselves. But capitalism is a reflection, can be seen as a reflection of the consumer ethics. So it's kind of like in the same way that a president, no matter how vile they are, is an actual true reflection of who the people of the country are and the state of the country. Or in the same way, you know, how violent hip hop is indicative of how violent the streets are. You know what I mean? It's the same thing when it comes to this capitalism, is that how bad it is reflecting the state of how we are as a society, and that we award bad behavior, we award theft, we are comfortable delegating a lot of rights and responsibility and accountability that could put checks into places. We defer that and make it seem as something that is not for us, and we rely on these experts who at the times we don't even interrogate on how valid they are in understanding the idea. And then we have a perverse relationship with ourselves in social media, and also, you know, believing in height and making up fake riches, and then being depressed, and we're caught up in that cycle. It gets deep.
And you feel like those things are our internal problems that play out in capitalism versus capitalism's focus on profit and earnings, creating or contributing to those problems.
Earnings and profit don't always have to be a bad thing. A good example is that Patagonia, the CEO, the founder of Patagonia this weekend gave up a company worth $3.8 billion. So all the profits that Patagonia sees, which actually is its revenue as a company is around $400 million a year. It's a pretty big company. He's saying this company now is an NGO. Patagonia is effectively an NGO. All the profits that this company makes are then are now moved into helping people, right? So when I look at that aspect of capitalism that has allowed for this company to be a multi-billion-dollar institution that now can direct funds back, that's still within the realm of what's possible in capitalism. But that's not necessarily the case of what's happening.
But it's a really interesting example, because taking all of those resources and all of that capital, right, that company represents, and putting it in the hands of a collective is pretty socialist. You know what I'm saying? So it's funny, because I think where I land on the economic spectrum for now, as I continue my quest leftward, is like social democracy, where I understand the benefits of being able to create capital and to create certain efficiencies that capitalism has. But I think the idea that not putting a limit on either profit or not putting a very clear regulations on how much companies need to give back to social welfare is foolish. And so I think we need to focus on those things. And I think there are lots of ways in which we already do that. There are serious problems with public schools. There are inefficiencies in public transportation. There are imperfect systems of public health care around the world. But I think that we can, in certain areas, we've agreed that we need to maintain a certain accessibility for essential services. So let them run up the iPhones. Let them run up the Samsung TVs. Let it be 25K, 37K, whatever it is. But when it comes to land, house, bread, education, let's make sure that those things are set at an affordable level. And that's the extent to which I think socialism has a place in this conversation.
You know, speaking of where socialism can particularly work. How familiar are you with like the Norwegian and Scandinavian system of socialism, and is that a type of socialism that you see as the best example of it?
I think they're a funny example because from when I was like kind of doing some of my research, I found out that they don't like to be used as an example for socialism. They don't call their practices socialist. But I think Denmark and yeah, some of those other Scandinavian countries, in the ways that they've created a social safety net that isn't that's a net good, right? Get it? Social safety net, that's a net good, right? Because in the certain respects, a lot what those Scandinavian countries have showed us is that you can create a safety net for people, and sometimes that slows down the growth of your GDP, right? But at a certain point, every country is in a different place to decide this. But I think a lot of countries would find that the overall net good of people is improved if you are willing to slow down on some of that GDP growth. And this also brings climate change into the conversation, right? But slowing down and allowing and preparing for a slowdown in that GDP growth, allocating spending accordingly, but knowing that the reason for that GDP growth is that you're creating a social safety net that raises the quality of life for the people with the least means, I think is something that you have to be prepared for. So they're like, socialism is a very like is can be very extreme, and what Scandinavian countries have implemented isn't exactly that, but I think it does serve as a model for what we can think about implementing here and stop being so afraid of, in terms of letting those ideas make up where capitalism is really failing us.
I like what you said about a social safety net being considered, and that's where I see the ability to be able to adopt these different, if you will, socialist elements into capitalism, which is what I think the Scandinavian countries are doing. Now, where it gets, again, on the extreme side where it's perverse, we're seeing bankers now trying to put into motion a bill that will allow them to remove the ceiling cap on what they can earn in bonuses. And the whole bonus culture, if you track it back to how it transformed banking for, as we know it now, the whole reason banks are so aggressive in pushing credit and those types of things stems back to banks being granted these bonuses in terms of these massive bonuses and what they can make, right? So I like that social safety net and putting that into place. As a community activist, Mr. Miles Xavier, and as a trusted brain and thought leader in making Chicago a better place, here I am, gang of money, and I want to come to you as a person who's got his money through capitalist endeavors. How do I apply the social safety net, and what would you do with it?
Man, it depends on what your business is and what capital that's not just financial that you have that we can use already. Do you have space? Do you have factories? Like, can we employ people? But not only employ people through the capital that you've been able to build, but you're gonna have to let go of, like, you're gonna have to not just give away some of the money, you're gonna have to give away some of the ownership. That's what we want to democratize, is the ownership. In the same way that we've seen folks at Amazon and folks at Tesla like come together to unionize to have a greater piece of the pie of what these multi-million billion dollars companies are producing. We want you to give up some of that infrastructure and give up that means of production so that those people not only reap what you're able to give them off the top of your profits, but they take their piece first. That's what I would say. Give it up in that sense. And I want to address what you said about the bankers too, because it illustrates like the key problem with capitalism that I think how much of it we keep or disregard, we need to address, is that capitalism relies on the people at the top to be their most magnanimous self, like to be their most giving, generous self, right? The idea is that everybody is Zwei. The idea is that everybody is hungry ass Zwei who made it to the top with love and support from his village and remembers that where he came from and wants to spend money and give it all back, right? Or even less ideal than that at least they made it to the top, they're going to spend a lot of money, and that's going to trickle down to people that need money. But that's not what happens. Those people at the top take them big bonuses, they take them salaries, and they hide them in offshore bank accounts, right? They hide them in places where they can rack up a lot of interest, but they don't get spent. Those dollars don't circulate in the United States, let alone circulate in the neighborhoods that are at the bottom of that totem pole. So that's the issue, man. We need to make sure that those dollars circulate. We can't leave it. We can't think that everybody gonna be Zway, man. We gotta make sure that there are systems in place that say, this is what Zway would do with this money if he was a billionaire capitalist, and this is what you gonna do with it too.
So ask yourself, WWZD, what would Zway do? You know what I mean? And yo, I hate that you forced that out of me. I don't, but I appreciate it.
It's the highest compliment I can give you is that I would trust you with those funds and that power. We gotta make sure that everybody that gets there, if they're not that trustworthy, there's a mechanism to say, come on, man, you can't be paying zero taxes while people starving.
You know, one of the things that drives me is being able to show that you can become wealthy helping people. I think that's so important. That's so important. If we can all understand that there is a way to make a living helping people, and not just a living. You know, that's why we want to make this thing look fly. You know, that's why we take such a careful approach to the aesthetic of helping people, because the perception is that when you helping people is a pauper's game. You know, you see some of the people that have been the most giving also be the ones who have the least. Jesus died a pauper. Gandhi moved from a palace into a panhandler. There's all these different examples around us. Mother Teresa, if you consider a good person, it gets controversial on that one. But still, apparently she was killing black babies, dude. It's wild.
Yo, but I appreciate what you're saying, and I appreciate, like the type of person that you are. You the aesthetic that you speak of, you put this shirt on me. You saw me out here looking like a pauper, you know what I'm saying? I was like a po pimp, and he was like, you know what? Hold this right quick. Now I'm fresh. That's the type of billionaire Zway is.
And with every good team, the second is always as good as the first, because I too am rocking a shirt that Miles Xavier gave me, baby. We rocking each other's merch.
We out here.
Can't plan that. That was not planned.
Family.
So don't be up in the comments talking about all that you guys coordinate your outfits before you get on the show. We don't coordinate, even though it does look like today we definitely did. That's not the case. We're researchers.
Carefully coordinated content that's coming soon. That's a t-shirt. Look out for the merch. Let's go to current news.
So, justice for Chris Kaba, justice for Chris Kaba, justice. It's always unfortunate when we come to this show in order to speak about issues that are as disturbing as the unarmed black man Chris Kaba, who was killed in the UK last week. There's since been a flooding of protesters with justice for Chris Kaba, and we stand for Black Lives, protesting. Let's say that's what they've been protesting on. This is something that we've spoken about a lot. Miles, you've helped organize Black Lives Matter marches. What can you give us on the killing of Chris Kaba?
Just that this is all too familiar. Just that this was an unarmed black man killed in South London, right? And that could end up with anything, right? Unarmed black man killed in the United States. Unarmed black man killed in France. You know what I'm saying? You could. It could be any of us, right? And I can't be anything. I can only be armed or unarmed. That's it. I can't be any less armed than unarmed, right? And so as a black man, it hurts. It's hard to feel like, hard to feel safe, right? And But my hope, and even though I'm, tired of having to have these conversations, my hope is that we ain't gonna stand for this too much more as we recognize this as a global collective struggle, right? So yesterday was designated as a day of protest organized by Justice for the Chris Kaba campaign. They are, and even to add insult to injury, right? They were this giant protest was covered by the news and miscovered as a celebration of the Queen's death, or like of her memory. And that, like, how backwards can you have it? But these folks came together. The Justice for Chris Kaba campaign came together to celebrate Chris's life, and to demand justice for over 1,800 deaths in the police custody since 1990 in the UK. Like, it's crazy. So the Independent Office for Police Conduct, the IOPC, is investigating what happened on September 5th when Chris Kaba was shot. The officer was suspended after this public pressure started to bubble up. And so we're just in this position again where we're grieving and we're trying to figure out what's next. Oh, snap. We lost weight. I didn't even realize that. That's crazy, man. I was so deep in what I was saying, trying to communicate to y'all. Wow. But dang. Well, until my brother come back, man, I guess I'm just hold it down and just be like, yo, man, this is, yeah, like I said, all too familiar. You know how I do. You know how my stance on policing, and just what the world is like under the system of mass incarceration. I think there's too many jobs wrapped up in the police, right? I think these folks are asked to be social workers. They're asked to be protectors of property, of life, of our way of life, and I don't think they're doing a very good job. But you don't have to take it from me, right? The Metropolitan Police Service been messing up, right? But I'm gonna get into that in 1 second. Let's see some comments popping up. Y'all need to have a segment on fighting in the UFC. Oh man, shout out to our folks commenting, man. Shout out to Chilla. We always appreciate you joining the show, man, holding it down. You're right, man. We do need to have a segment on fighting in the UFC, because I'm gonna fight my brother for leaving me on the pod. But it's all good, man. We're glad you're back.
Yo, I love the fact that coming back into the room, and please excuse the technical difficulties, seeing yo producer run my comments as one of the comments is the perfect way to get back into this, man. Thanks for covering the Chris Kaba situation, and I'm sure you've touched on how the people of the UK community are feeling overseen, overlooked. It does come at a time of national mourning. Over here, we get the news that the Queen has passed. That's one thing. But in the UK, I was seeing emails from the uni talking about, hey, this is national mourning. Counselors are available if you need to be able to speak about this 97-year-old woman who definitely participated in a murderous regime. There's help for you. There's that type of thing going on too. So that really can overshadow what is something that communities of people of color in the UK have called out for the longest. We saw them do the same thing during Black Lives Matter with Daniel Kaluuya and his speech that he gave, and John Bottega. I think more so John Bottega giving that speech in the middle, being very impassioned. But like, people in the UK are also going through this, right? That's not something that's different from what we understand our brothers and sisters in the US are going through with this police brutality. Same thing in Nigeria. So it's kind of the same issue. I think to some extent it would be cool to be able to find how we can get involved in this, who we can reach out to, some info of where people can go find a way to be a part of the situation, because this unarmed black man was killed. Did you get into the specifics of the details of how the murder happened?
I didn't. But so basically the information that I have is that he was driving. He is in his Audi. He got hemmed in, pulled over by two police cars on a narrow residential street, and then one round was fired from a police weapon and killed him, right? And it put me in this really messed up place of being like, of hoping there's a video, but also hoping there's not, like not wanting to see it at all, but thinking that's the only way, if this is caught on camera and filmed from multiple angles, that we're going to get justice. And even then, right? But I'm sitting here hoping that it was captured for justice, because I don't believe that justice will be served otherwise, but hoping that what a crazy thing to hope for, you know?
So that's actually one of the three things that the family had called for as part of their demands on how the proceedings should go, which is that they want to be able to see the video. Is that first the police that did it gets suspended, which he has been, that they want to be able to see the video and get released the footage, and also on how long the trial is going to take. So this coming week, they are going to be able to show the family the footage of what happened and release that body cam for everyone to take a better look. And then also they say that the process is a complicated 6 to 9 month process. And, you know, just imagine in the midst of having lost a family member, not having to go to war, you know, through legal battle for 9 months, man, that's excruciating ordeal. So whatever further assistance, you know, if this is a movement that touches your heart, definitely, you know, this family is going to need a lot of that support. It really, like, you know, being a black dude, man, it does get very, hearing this type of thing is one of those situations where you're like, it could be any of us. And that's what makes it, you know, always hit home, where it's just like, man, this dude was in his car, altercation, what they said he had on him, he didn't have, and now he's dead, you know? So quite honestly speaking, Miles, I feel that type of fear the most when I'm in the U.S. The U.S. is one of the hardest countries for me to be. As a black person, it's quite tiring to be so hyper vigilant about your blackness in different spaces.
Yeah, it weighs on you, right? And it's traumatic. I mean, you spend years and years in these spaces. I currently live in one of the most heavily policed and surveilled spaces in the United States, right? Because the combination of the Chicago Police Department and the University of Chicago Private Police, which is the largest private police department in the United States, or university police department in the United States. And yeah, it's a lot of 12 around the clock, 12, all right? So I feel you, and it weighs on you, and it results in a disproportionate amount of contact with the police for people that aren't engaged in any type of criminal activity, right? Or are engaged in the type of criminal activity that everybody's involved in, right? Bootlegging movies and whatever, the tiniest misdemeanors you get caught up for. And it's an issue that disproportionately affects the black and brown folks that we try to lift up and support on this show. I came with the facts today, getting back to the UK, right? This Chris Kaba situation comes at a time where the Met is already under investigation, not only for their stop and search practices, but for a variety of failures, right? I'm gonna hit y'all with some more facts real quick, just because we trying to inform the people.
Get them.
So 2 out of 10 of their stop and searches get a result, right? This is a practice that has been going on, stopping folks for, they're supposed to have reasonable suspicion, but they also got this code joint called Section 60, which means they can search a specific area without reasonable suspicion. Just stop and search anybody they think they want to stop, right? This results in black people being 9 times more likely to be searched by the Metropolitan Police, right? Stop and search. The Metropolitan Police also have a persistent backlog of online child abuse referrals. They've also been cited for failure to prevent re-victimization and for failure to tell victims that investigations into their crimes were being dropped. So you got people that have been contacted by the police, told they're being investigated, and never informed of anything else later again, right? Not to mention the murder of Sarah Everard earlier this year by the Met officer Wayne Cousins. Not to mention the strip searching of child Q, something I don't advise everybody to look up, but that's a real terrible situation that happened. The stop and search of Bianca Williams and her boyfriend Ronaldo dos Santos. It's Ricardo dos Santos, who are both Olympic athletes, right? Like the list goes on and on of the failures of this police department that have already been cited and investigated. So at what point do we collectively agree that, as scary as it may be to reimagine what systems we put in place to replace police, that we might have to take that seriously?
This comes from the same country that in 2001 produced a study that said, actually, there is no racism in Britain, you guys. Congratulations. There's no racism. So everybody get back to mourning the Queen peacefully. And it's a bit difficult to do when you have folks like my brother Miles, who puts out the information so clearly, man. It clearly is another instance where people of color are being treated disproportionately. So we've always had this conversation of defund the police, don't defund the police. And I think, we understand each other's stances and we have different nuances towards the same stance. But in the case of the UK being an international man of impact, you get the call, you get the call to assist and be a part of a thinking entity. What's your contribution and ideas on what's a priority in order for this to get better?
Well, I think the UK is an interesting case where, in a lot of ways, I envy the lack of armed police, right? And like, clearly, it's still too many, right? Rest in peace to Chris Kaba. But I would investigate and like to lean on evidence-based methods for ways to connect the police with the community. And by police, I mean whatever individuals are left on that force after we decide who should really be doing the job of a social worker, or which of their duties should really be done by a social worker, which of them should really be done by a mental health professional, which of them should really be done by a lawyer, right? Or somebody with or a variety of different, like just maybe somebody should respond that's just a paramedic, right? So whoever's left on the force, they need to have a deep connection with community, and there has to be a very clear system of accountability for any harm, including and aside from violence that's perpetrated on that community. I would say that there needs to be a council of people to hold the police accountable, and the idea that the police should get together and share only amongst themselves what really happens, right? The blue wall of silence needs to be completely unacceptable. Professionalize, limit the amount of people that actually need to be armed police to the bare minimum that you possibly can, and then professionalize those people so that they have the utmost training, not only to de-escalate, which is so key, de-escalate, not escalate, de-escalate situations, but also address situations when they really do need escalation in the way that preserves the most life, no matter who's on the other side of the gun.
That lack of professionalism, is something that goes just beyond people of color getting policed. We also saw that happen at the school shooting that happened in New Mexico, where now the footage has come out of the police who were in the hallway for close to an hour as this dude was just shooting up the school, So I definitely do think there's a lot of room for that. Thank
For sure. I got
you for sharing that with us. Also acknowledge about things that are not de-escalating but escalating is the hip-hop scene.
Yes, sir.
Hip-hop scene is heating up. Woo-hoo. It's heating up. It's ascending. It's quite hot. Rick and review. So much good music.
Yes, sir. I'm interested to see how you feel about this one, because I ain't gonna cap to you. This artist is somebody who I've seen a couple of freestyles here and there, and then I saw the album dropped, and I was like, we gonna review it. Threw that in the group chat. Hadn't heard a song. Hadn't heard not one song off the album, and I was like, we gonna review this. So Symba, results take time. First impression, what you think?
I like how you prefaced how most people have gotten to know Symba, and that's through a lot of the freestyles that he did. I remember his first freestyle that I jumped onto was with the LA Leakers. When he jumped onto that freestyle, that was brazy. Just the confidence and his eloquence, it really stands out. It really stands out. You can tell this is somebody that has put in so much of that work into his craft, which is why results take time is just so fitting of a title. Sometimes you see people that are getting their shine, and it's very clear that they've had to do so much to earn that type of shine. And thinking about what you want your record to look like when you have that shine on you, I think results takes time is that's a very good way to be able to continue that interest in your craft.
Yeah, this for me was a very interesting project from a sonic perspective. I don't want to say it sounds dated, but it sounds like it could have came out 10 years ago and been hot. It works now. Could have came out 20 years ago, been hot. You know what I mean? It's got a timelessness that goes backwards that I hope goes forwards, if that makes sense. And it was also interesting for me for the first time kind of listening to an album that's definitely a come-up story, definitely an introduction, if not a reintroduction, and feeling like, kind of like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, he's on the come-up. And there was I'm so much, as from a kid in my relationship with hip-hop, I'm so used to listening to this type of come-up music and hungry music from such a hungry young place that this was one of the first times that I'm listening to an album and hearing that hunger, and it feels younger than me, but I'm still able to appreciate it. I don't know if you got that vibe.
Definitely hustle music, it's definitely hustle music, and it is come up music. I think what Symba has done well is be able to take on a lot of his influences with reference to Nip, with reference to Ross, with reference to a lot of the legends that come out of the Bay Area where he's from, just completely being respected by many circles. Symba's been respected by many circles, so it's just one of those cases in hip hop where the algorithm of be talented, work hard on your craft, and when you have your time, you'll be ready for your time, and it definitely sounds like that. Funny enough, speaking about reminiscent of music we would listen to when we were younger, this is another Gangsta Grillz tape by DJ Drama, which we saw. Tyler the Creator's album was a Gangsta Grillz tape. The J. Cole album was a Gangsta Grillz tape. Clearly, this is something that is Drama's making a pretty big comeback. Almost felt a little bit like the Meek Mill Dream Chaser series is the vibe and energy I got off of this album.
100%. Drama adds something that is so uniquely hip-hop. Although he was talking some wild stuff on this one, man. I don't know who asked DJ Drama if he writes his shit talking, but there are no dumb questions, but come on, man. I never got the impression that it was written. But
what if he has a ghostwriter?
That would be hilarious. That would be Hip-Hop Hall of Fame fact worthy for sure. If somebody was writing down, we the best to ever do it. Yo, say this.
say this. Give me eyes.
DJ Drama with flashcards behind the boards is crazy, son. But
4 words at a time.
Yo, punching in. Yo, that's nuts. Nah, but it definitely lends both an authenticity to this project, but also like just like a true hip hop feel. So getting like actually into the music, my man comes out swinging overnight, high energy. It's a good one to hook people into the album. Never Change with Roddy Ricch, another artist we've had some conversations about on this podcast. We'll see where his trajectory goes. And then Never End Up Broke. I think that first 3 was a super solid 3 to bust out the gate with. The album lulls a little bit for me in the middle and comes back strong at the end. But I think throughout, he's picking good beats. He's using samples. He used his budget immaculately for this project. I think it comes together super hard.
I'm inclined to agree with you, brother. I think the first three they come out swinging. Never End Up Broke was a single that I dropped recently. So it really is a great start. Like you say, it does take a bit of an experimental softer side towards a few of the other tracks, which I'm not all the way there with yet. But that No Sleep, Pop Out, and how he closes the album out is pretty dope. I think Symba is really, really talented and has great content and great perspective as a rapper. It will be very interesting to see him put together. It will be interesting to see where he goes with the content that he's putting out. Just considering that the peers that he's up against, these are dudes that are very romantic, but also very vulnerable, and really have a very good way of playing with their romanticizing their trauma. So that we're talking about Rashad, we're talking about Buggy, we're talking about who else do we want to be able to put on that list? Jid off of his last album. We're speaking about Reason. These are all dudes that play with the romantic elements of vulnerability and trauma. So it's going to be interesting to see how Symba applies that, shifting gear like Meek, instead of being the dude that can only be boxed into this sort of music, but can then compete with his adversaries.
Man, and I think any album that can elevate you into that conversation is a win, right? So shout out to Symba, man. This is a really dope project. And it's, yeah, like I said, the way that he uses samples, the way that it's produced even gives it a very clean feeling. The songs that you like, I think, are gonna sound good 2 or 3 years from now. So yeah, man, shout out to him. I'm excited to see what he does next. My brother's been putting me on to that Jesse Reyes. I'm gonna go run that. I'm gonna rinse that for sure. What else do the people need to know about, man?
There's so much good music out, man. So much good music. ESTG, I Never Felt None, spectacular. Pink Sifu and Real Bad Man is really dope. Jesse Reyes' album is out. So much good music. Ari Lennox came out. Green Tea Peng. Oh my goodness, it is a overwhelming amount of good music, bro. That's what I've been on. What you listening to?
Man, I've been stuck in some of the albums, been trying to spend some time with some of the albums we've reviewed recently. Going back to that JID, going back to that Joey Badass. Yeah, man, that Mac Hami that came out a couple weeks ago. So I'm in that mode, just waiting on this Freddie.
Waiting on the Freddie. And something else that other people are waiting on is when we get together in Chicago in a few weeks and get into our studio space and keep delivering all sorts of new contents to the people. Shout out to everybody that's been rocking us for as far as, because we know.
Oh, yeah, we know. We've been cooking up just for y'all because we know y'all could be anywhere in the world. But y'all choose to rock with us, joining us on this Sunday. We thank you for being in conversation with us, for rocking with us through technical difficulties, and as we try and react to the world and figure all this stuff out in real time. Man, shout out to our producer who joins and facilitates and makes possible this celebration of celebrating, the celebration of life, the celebration of how good it feels to be black. Don't it feel good, Sway?
It's one of my favorite things.
Yes, sir. And we hope it feel good to be you in whatever skin you in. Be good to yourself, man. Eat something delicious. Hug somebody you love. Watch some dragons tonight. Let's get it.
Yeah, I get that. But is we live, though? Is we, like, all the